Dear Florida Board of Medicine, my name is Camille, and I am, as I know you are, concerned about the well-being of those suffering from gender dysphoria, especially children. I've come here today to share my story in hopes of preventing this from happening to others. I was struggling with severe mental illness, CPTSD, major depressive disorder, ADHD, generalized anxiety disorder, and suicidal ideation. Knowing this, my doctors approved and performed a gender-neutral top surgery on me, one between feminine and masculine that has no biological blueprint in nature. I didn't even know what to ask for. All I knew was that the discomfort with my breast had been unbearable. I wanted them gone. Medicaid paid for it. Days after the surgery, I developed complications. One day I woke up and knew something was wrong. My feet were ice cold, starting to discolor, and in a hysterical state, I went to the ER. I had developed Raynaud's syndrome. They sent me home with a Valium, which at first relaxed, then sent my body into shock, causing me to abruptly wake up with sweat pooled under my eyes. Shortly after, I developed bony prominences, heat rashes, random sharp pains, skin discoloration, and would bruise when my doctors tried to check my pulse. For months I hardly slept because the ringing of the tinnitus was so loud. I felt isolated and was inconsolable. Even with the severity of the complications, my doctors didn't understand how to treat me because my issues fell outside their standard of care. They stopped taking me seriously. My mother talked to me about psychiatric hospitalization. My main concern is that you will ban gender care, but not provide alternatives. It took me 2 years, but I'm the most emotionally stable I've been in my entire life. But not because of the gender-affirming care I received. High risk, invasive, has left me with a deformed body and complications I still struggle with today. The holistic treatments that improved my mental and physical health were low risk and non-invasive. We need better treatments for people like myself. I ask that the board please look into inflammatory and autoimmunity biomarkers of those struggling with gender dysphoria. I have issues with both, but as my inflammatory markers went down, I stabilized emotionally. I believe this needs to be looked into. I'm grateful for you taking the time to hear what I have to say, so what happened to me doesn't happen to someone else.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Dangerous Rhetoric. This is episode 99. I'm Brentley.
I'm Dan.
And before we get into it today, just want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, comment, share the video, give us money. There's links in the description. We love you. Thank you so much for your attention.
Gracias.
We appreciate you. We see you guys out there in the
Yes.
comments. Thank you so much. Today, you just saw a little clip from Camille Kiefel. Camille is a California resident, right, Camille?
Oh, actually, Oregon.
Oregon, right?
Oregon.
She's over on that left coast. So she
Left
was
coast.
early impacted by the radical gender ideology. She got some bad advice, and she suffered a lot of medical complications, as you just saw described. So Camille, thank you so much for joining us, for discussing your journey, as they call it these days.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you making the time. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
This is a topic that we like to cover often on the show because we think it's a very serious situation. We've had a few detrans people on before. We've had Richie or Tulip, right? Tulip R.
Tulip Richie.
We've had Shapeshifter on, who had a very harrowing experience, and I think was at the Florida board meeting, right?
Yeah, I think Shape testified there.
Yeah.
Shape also testified there. We've had on our friend Laura Becker a couple times. And we've also had a trans person who is not detrans, but is also against, pushing this stuff onto kids. Sarah Higdon. I don't know if you know Sarah.
She's had a Trans Against Groomers now.
Yeah, so Sarah's very based and is doing a lot to also talk about this stuff and, get the word out there. But thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So how old are you now, Camille?
I am 32.
Hey, so am I.
Nice.
1990, we out here.
Right.
And when did you get the first exposure to the trans mania? How young were you?
So I'm kind of like in an interesting position because I'm like an older detransitioner, so I wasn't exposed to gender ideology growing up. I was kind of exposed to the basis of it because I was in a very liberal town. So
Right.
um
Schools.
yeah, because I was near like the Portland area. So
Okay.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so I was still getting kind of like, because I think that too, it's just like it was kind of like that set the foundations for what we're dealing with today.
It's very cultural.
Right. And so I was introduced to kind of this radical gender ideology when I went to college. I was a women's study minor, and that's where gender ideology was being taught because the idea of like intersectionality. So they were putting gender ideology with that because it fell under that sort of like thought process.
Yeah.
So
Same umbrella.
Coming out of like the feminist studies or the sociology studies.
It's all critical theory, right? It all falls under that.
Yeah, well, it's in the
Yeah.
same sort of postmodern umbrella.
Peterson would call it.
Yeah, that's the studies, I call them. It's
Well,
gender studies, women's studies, African American studies. Anything that has studies after it is like,
as I mentioned before,
Right.
we had 3 detransitioners on before you. All of them transitioned after the age of 18
as adults.
So Laura, I think, was around 19. Richie, I think, was like 26 or 20.
He was I think 29, I think.
Later,
Later,
and same
yeah.
thing with Shapeshifter, also transitioned as an adult. So clearly, this phenomenon, it's not something that's just affecting the youth. It is affecting people who are just undergoing certain traumas and things like that, and those aren't being addressed, and they're kind of being pushed into this direction of just affirm. And Brett and I are very adamant that what needs to change is that approach, that affirm approach, and we need to go back to a watchful waiting approach when dealing with something like gender dysphoria.
Right. Yeah, I think too, it's what's important would be to look at underlying health issues, because once I addressed like the physical health issues, like I realized, oh, I've been a woman this whole time, and that I was just disconnected from my body and dealing with trauma. But I had done up to the point of doing the non-binary top surgery.
Okay.
I had done 20 years of traditional talk therapy, including EMDR, DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, which is kind of like a common skill-based, I guess, well-known skill-based therapy. And I also did like hypnotherapy.
Interesting.
And I had done 2 rounds of a treatment called TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy.
What is
which
that?
It's like a cousin to ECT. And I always say, like, it's like, think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And like, the shock therapy, that's ECT, or electroconvulsive therapy. Now, TMS is a cousin to ECT, and it's a much safer cousin, because when it comes to electroconvulsive therapy, things like anti-retrograde amnesia can be a potential issue. Like there's this really sad video I recommend people watch. It's Ketamine Save Me. Like, she talks about like how, kind of like Memento, she's writing things down because she can't remember things anymore. Yeah, so I mean, ECT is like, I mean, I've been horrified like researching it, and so thankfully I just did TMS, which is far safer. But I mean, that's kind of the thing, is that we're resorting to these types of treatments instead of like, okay, well, I've been a pescatarian since I was, let's see here, since like high school. So I've been like pescatarian for I was well over 10 years a pescatarian. So like nobody was like, well, maybe you should try eating meat again. Like, and then I started eating meat again. I started feeling better. It's like that and some other things, but
yeah, I was reading you had some inflammatory issues, right? That were sort of just totally unaddressed. And it wasn't until later This is
Mhm.
something that I have personal issues with inflammation too. I'm lactose milk intolerant, so like casein. I also have gluten problems. So if I get
Yeah.
glutened, it's like flu-like symptoms and body aches and all kinds of
Yeah.
bathroom unpleasantness for sometimes 24 to 72 hours, depending on the dose. So I've had that. I've been down that road. Definitely not fun. Diet so important for people.
I think you're
It
the first.
is, yeah.
I think you're the first person who's been through this that has actually brought up diet and whether or not there's a connection to the things you eat to this sort of thing.
Well, the other thing that occurred to me too, with you said pescatarian for 10 years, fish, depending on where it comes from, can be very high in certain heavy metals.
Oh yeah.
So there can be like the need to like detox from that. I had to do a heavy metal detox. I had high levels of lead and cadmium for some reason in my blood. And that was like a whole thing that I had to go through. But these aren't things that they tell, like, kids present with like problems and they're like, I think we, I saw that you had not even 2 hours worth of consult at that one gender clinic.
Right.
And they were already like, okay, here's your like note for surgery and stuff. I'm just like,
right. It's crazy. Like, I think one of them was like a 50-minute appointment and one of them was like a 60-minute appointment. So it was just like, it's just shocking. Like, I never went in person. Because like this is during COVID, which is also like a whole other layer of insanity with all this. But I went in, or like I just did a video call and we talked about it. They knew about my history of trauma. I wasn't lying about anything, and then they just approved me. And I think too, what's part of the problem is that you have that ideological bent that's like influencing these people like to write these letters and that not being critical about it. Yeah. So
these are them. Brave space. These are the ladies. Yeah, and they yes, get them, Camille.
What article is this?
This is from the something post. Oregon woman sues trans care team over disgusting misdiagnosis. Left her maimed. Should be maimed.
Male.
They should be maimed. Definitely maimed.
That's it would have been funny if they put A-M-A-L-E-D, mailed. It's funny. But all right. So how far did you actually go into the process? You said you did undergo surgery.
Yeah. So well, it was kind of interesting because I never wanted hormones like for it. And that's, again, like the weird part of this is that it's like completely on the patient, like to decide the form of treatment rather than doctors deciding like what helps, these individuals.
Right.
Which
it's
is
like
bizarre.
A la carte.
Yeah.
It's like,
take
your pick of these fabulous gender treatments we have available for
right.
you.
Definitely not how that's
mix and match. Whichever one you like will affirm whatever. It's like, is that how medicine's supposed to work?
So you didn't go on testosterone?
No. And what was odd was that, like, now looking back on it, I'm like, they performed a non-binary top surgery on me, which has like no biological blueprint in nature. Like, you can't be like, hey, like there's an actual human being that has the surgery that we're going to emulate, or not the surgery, but this type of like, physical body. Like, we're going to like do that for you. It's like and it shows us how like custom this is and how like designer, it's just very odd because like I was never thinking of it that way when I was getting the surgery or like wanted to get the surgery. So it's really bizarre. And just like the doctors are like in on it. Like, the doctors are a part of this ideology. The surgeons are. I mean, I think there's some people who want to do this for money and who like that's their goal. But I think a lot of people are just influenced by an ideology that doesn't allow you to be critical of, anything that relates to being trans.
They think they're helping.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure some of them really truly believe that, and they can't really see past that blind spot where it's like, you're not helping. This is like some Frankenstein shit here. Like, why are we allowing this to happen? So how old were you when you got the surgery?
I was 30.
You were 30. So this was about 2 years ago, roughly. And so that happened during the whole pandemic process, like when that whole thing was going on. Yeah. And that's another thing too. It's like, you mentioned that was a whole other layer, and it's like a lot of people were undergoing mental health issues and all sorts of things like that, addictions, during that time. I know I had my own little mental break. I'm sure most people had a certain low period during that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, instead of factoring that in, you know, hey, society just like radically changed and they closed everything down. Maybe we should take a step back here. None of that was even like factored into, you know, the decisions.
Right. It was just like odd because they knew about my history and everything and how like I was so treatment resistant. And like the problem too is like I couldn't take medications. So like when doctors would try and deal with my mental illness through a medication route, like none of those things worked. And so yeah, I remember like the only thing that seemed to work was ADHD medication, like methylphenidate CD, but it would dry out my mouth. And so I got gum disease and I'm like, oh, so I can't take this. So it was just like hard because like that was the only thing that would kind of regulate my emotions. But then it's just, you know, then there's side effects to that as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of complicated, you know, intersecting issues that were being unaddressed. And they were just sort of like throwing a bunch of different treatments at the wall to see what stuck. And, you know, nothing was really working. It's a sorry indictment of the medical industry and of modern medicine. You know, we're supposed to have this advanced, powerful, you know, American medical establishment that's supposed to be able to cure any ills, and you should be so lucky to have access to it. And here they are, and they're like, we don't really know what's wrong. We'll try this. We'll try that.
Not just that. It seems like they're jumping to like the most drastic types of treatments before even trying more simple things, like she said, like changing your diet or maybe like meditation, things like that.
It's funny how people don't really know about the sort of chronic inflammatory issues, especially related to diet. Contamination with heavy metals, microplastics, like chemicals. People are sensitive to the chemicals sometimes in their shampoo and their toothpaste. And never in a million years would they think that they're having some sort of sensitivity or an allergy to the toothpaste or the shampoo. But, you know, it happens. And doctors don't look to that first.
You won't know until you like attempt to eliminate that thing from your diet or and then seeing how you feel later, and then maybe trying to reintroduce it and then seeing if that changes, you know, if you go back to the way you were feeling before. So would you say when you changed your diet, was that like the biggest thing that helped?
There was a couple different things. So because I also like tried supplements, and the thing is like I don't really know which supplements helped. Like there was a supplement I took that helped me get off of Ambien because I was like, after the surgery, I developed all these health complications, and the doctors took me seriously at first, then stopped taking me seriously. So yeah, it's like when it comes to the actual treatments, like I've kind of like just tried a bunch of different things. But what I noticed what kind of started was that I did body work, and then I did my first Bowen session, and I was like, oh, that's what I've been needing for the last, like, you know, 20, 30 years, you know? So like, and it was like this, it was interesting because like, it's like a manual therapy. I describe it kind of like massage, but it's more intentional. So you're like pushing the skin and pulling it. And it's an interesting form of treatment, but so I realized at that point I responded very well to body work. So I look out body work, different types of body work, and try those. And then I was also doing I started doing earthing or grounding, depending on like there's two different ways of saying it, but like where you like the idea is kind of like I think it's like negative ions in the earth or something, and so it helps with inflammation. And so like you can go barefoot on the ground, like that's one way to earth, but like I have an earthing pad. Actually, I had an anti-static wristband because I work with computers, and so I put that on my wrist, and then I put it in the grounding. I put it in the grounding prong in my outlet. And I remember I did this for like 3 days, and the third day I woke up and I was like, I'm going to drop my sertraline dose by a half. And I was like, okay, this is something I'm just going to like just sleep on this thing every night, you know? I mean, it doesn't hurt to sleep on it. So I'm just going to try that. And then from there, I saw Michaela Peterson.
She's great.
Yeah. And I was like watching You Are Here, and I was like, wow, she seems like really stable, and she only eats meat. And then she was talking about all these health issues that were reversed through going on this carnivore diet. And I was like, oh, like, I'm just going to try that and see how that helps. And so I didn't go on full on carnivore, but like I started eating meat again. which was good because we found out like a couple months later that I was low on ferritin. So that was probably why I was like so dysfunctional as well. Which is weird because that happened after the surgery. So, so thankfully my ferritin levels are like, because they were originally like 90 before the surgery. When they tested again in 2021, because the surgery 2021, they tested again in February, and I was like 17. So I went from 90 to 17 on my ferritin levels, and I started eating meat again, and now I'm like, the last time I checked, which is like 2022, I'm now at like a 70. So thankfully I've gotten my ferritin levels up since going on, and I'm going to guess most of that was going on that carnivore diet, and eating organ meats, even though they're disgusting. So, and then I also did hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So that one was, I think, one of the most effective treatments for me. And what it is that you receive pure oxygen in a pressurized environment. So like I'll have like a face mask on, or like I forgot what I think they call it, a simple mask. And you put it on and you like do 20 minutes on with pure oxygen, 20 minutes off, or 5 minutes off, 20 on, 5 off, 20 on. So you do that. And like I did, like I was a part of a case study, and the results were that I went through 60 treatments. I went from severe to moderate anxiety to mild anxiety. My generalized anxiety disorder went away. And then my ADHD went from 72 to 6.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was like, that was obviously what I needed, was a treatment like that. But the thing is, like, I think what's great about something like hyperbaric oxygen therapy is that it's kind of like a catch-all treatment. So like if doctors don't know what to do with you, it's kind of like nice because, well, it just kind of treats the body. So.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot more about that popping up in the news lately, and it's good for sort of generalized problems, chronic issues that are intractable.
Kind of want to try it now.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's good stuff. They put you in, you basically like lay down in like a tube, and they jack the pressure up in the tube, and then you're sitting there and you're breathing the pure oxygen. The idea is that it really oxygenates your blood to let your body do all the things that it needs to do to heal and repair itself.
We probably both need that, breathing this Manhattan air in all the time.
Yeah. Yes.
Seriously. Like, I don't know if you've ever been to New York City, but
it's gross.
The air here is not.
Yeah.
I remember when we were in Florida in 2021, just that was one of the major differences, was just how beautiful and fresh the air was over there. We were also staying at a beach town, so we were near the ocean.
Perfectly humidified, just a little salty.
Yeah,
It was like,
it was great.
it was nice.
Then we would come back here and it'd be like
Oh.
Yeah. I'm gonna try that therapy now.
Yeah, it's a good idea. They probably got it here, I'm sure.
I'm sure we can find it somewhere.
So Camille, what are you doing since you're suing now, because we need to stop this? I think lawfare is actually one of the more effective weapons that we can utilize in people that like you, that have had complications, that were sort of coerced through the process or herded through the process.
We need accountability.
I feel like you are the people that are in that position to deploy these lawsuits. So hopefully, you act as an inspiration that things go forward. What can you tell us about the situation without getting too into it?
Right. So kind of just what I've talked about before with kind of like how quickly I was pushed through with these letters, and then also like part of the reason why I'm doing this is so that it doesn't happen to other people. It's because I went through a lot with that, and it's just like now I can't like breastfeed. I can never wear a dress. I can, but it doesn't like fit the same way. And it's just like, it's kind of sad. I recently I got like a 1950 swimsuit, which was like really cool. And it's just like, I don't fit it the right way. And it's just like, it's like the shoulders can like slip. I was wearing another swimsuit and the shoulder started slipping. And it's just like, it's just like, it's sad because it's just like this completely, unnecessary surgery. And like, it was like a misdiagnosis. I know Medicaid considered it a medical necessity. So it's just, I don't know, it's just like insane.
our friend Laura, who had a double mastectomy, and we've also had on the show, she like got certain like padded bras to just, I think, kind of deal with that and to fit certain clothes better, but also to like just feel better about herself when, you know, she looked in the mirror and that sort of thing. But I imagine that's really difficult, and there's a whole mourning process that you go through because there, you know, you feel like, wow, I lost like a piece of myself, literally.
Well, and it irks me because the first rule of medicine is do no harm.
Yeah.
They are not supposed to, you know, cause harm to people unless it's, you know, 100% absolutely medically necessary, and you know that's what the treatment calls for. It was clear in, you know, in the cases of kids or young people with gender dysphoria, it's not necessarily medically necessary in as many cases as they're ushering through the process. And as soon as there's, you know, there's dozens of folks that, you know, we could describe as D-trans, or just, you know, people who, you know, were herded through the process and later realized it was not for them. But once you have that, the medical industry and all these, you know, ruling medical bodies really needs to, like, you know, take a deep breath and reflect and decide what is really best for patients, because it's clear that what's happening right now is not.
Yeah. So I was mentioning your motivation and, you know, the reasons you chose to speak out, and from what I can tell, that seems to be the same motivation for everyone who's choosing to speak out, and it's that they want to try to prevent as many people as possible from going through this process and making a mistake. I'm not going to say that everyone who's detrans is like anti-trans and wants to eliminate the right of people, say adults, to make that choice later, but they definitely want to spread some education, share their experience, and say, well, here's what I went through. You could regret it. There could be these complications. It's very possible, and we should be giving that information to people up front and not just affirm all the time. And I think it's an admirable motivation, because it's probably really difficult to speak about these things. And there's something too that Casey Miller kind of brought to my attention. I don't know if you follow Casey on Twitter. Casey has talked about like how she feels like a lot of detrans people are kind of being used as like tokens on the right. So it's like they get attacked by people on the left, obviously, because they disrupt that narrative. But sometimes it feels like people on the right might be just using them to put them in front of everyone and be like, look how shocking these people are. And instead of seeing them as humans, because it's like, you're people, you know, you have all these things about you that have nothing to do with this that you went through. This is just one part of you that, you know, it's something you went through. Like when we had Laura Becker on, the first, you know, detrans person we talked to, we had a whole segment of that episode where I was just like, all right, well, who are you as a person? Like, what are you into? What are your interests beyond what happened to you? So I guess I'm going to pose that same question to you. Like, what interests you? What things are you motivated and passionate about?
Yeah, I'm like, I for me, I'm like really interested in like things like computers. Like my dad, growing up, my dad was also into computers, so he taught me how to, like, you know, put together one. And like, you know, like when I have an issue, like, I mean, I have like a MacBook Pro, and it's kind of funny because you're not really supposed to, like, Apple doesn't want you to mess with the MacBook Pro, but I mess with it anyways. And so, you know, it's like, I mean, I have like a new logic board in there that's not supposed to go in there, but it's like, yeah. And so and I mean, it's an older machine. It's like, now it's like, I think it's like 2014 is when like the year of the machine. So it's old and it's not performing super well, but I mean, it lasted. So, I mean, there's that. I wouldn't hold the candle up to like the newer Macs doing anything like that. But, you know, yeah, just like,
it's sinking into me right now that 2014 was almost 10 years ago. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm like, things from 2014 are old now technologically.
It's impressive though. 10-year-old machines to still last. I mean, I think that. Well, I replaced a bunch of parts.
I mean, if you, I'm sure if you maintain them and fix them, replace parts here and there. I'm not as computer savvy. He's the more computer savvy. I think that computer, I've replaced every single part except for the case. Yeah, well, you're the tech guy. Don't ask me how to take them apart and put them together. I can use them.
Which is funny. Like,
even problem solving. I have you do all the problem solving. I'm the painter, like artist type. I don't do the gadgets. I'm not too good with them.
Yeah, I'm the left brain. He's the right brain.
Yes, primarily. So did you
Yeah.
study computers? Did you go to school for that?
I didn't. Like, I wish I had done something, because I was like mainly focused on women's studies, because like I think it's partially because I have ADHD. Like, I was so fixated on that. And it just,
Right.
too, I was so miserable at the time. And this was being sold as like, this is why you're miserable, like, because of sexism and, all these other things, instead of like, well, you're right. Like, you're miserable because you have a poor diet, or you're not eating meat, and, there's all these other things that you can do. You're dealing with inflammation and your doctor's not checking it. Like, that was kind of like why that appealed to me. And then, yeah. So I wish I had done, studied that. I mean, I've kind of like done some self-study. Like, I was really into comics. The sad thing about that was that when I got into like, because I ended up developing CPTSD from being in like those women's studies classes.
Wow.
And so all the comics I was following, like the web comics, were pretty much all woke. And so I was just like, it was kind of like this painful thing. And I started getting away from comics and started getting towards film. So now I'm like really interested in film. I watched like a whole bunch of films one year, and then I have like a list of all the films I've watched. So it's, it's just like, it's interesting to me. Like, I'm a fan of like Stanley Kubrick's work, and,
That's great.
yeah, I and kind of throwing some like more obscure ones out there. Like, I really like Michael Powell's work. Like, I think it was like The Red Shoes, but also like Peeping Tom's really good. It's like,
Never seen The Red Shoes.
yeah, and then like Peeping Tom's kind of funny because it's like, it reminds me of like a Hitchcock film, but it's not a Hitchcock film because the leading lady isn't blonde. So, but yeah, it's like getting into film, and I like shoe construction, like just like kind of weird niche-y sort of things I'm into. So
I'm super into movies.
Yeah.
What's your favorite movie of all time? Do you have one?
Oh, that's hard.
I know. Challenge.
Oh, because like I could like do different films. Okay, I'd probably say Suspiria.
Oh, okay, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
there a remake?
Yeah, there was a
old one
remake.
and a remake.
There's
right?
another
The original.
one remake. Yeah, the original. The original's
I've
twisted.
Oh, yeah.
The original.
It's twisted.
Yeah, I'm like a total nerd, so I just say like the Lord of the Rings film trilogy, like
Uh-huh.
all three of them.
I'm Aliens, 1986,
Like
the
Aliens.
sequel.
Nice. Oh,
Big
okay. Actually never seen the sequel, but
The second
I
one,
like-
you never seen it? Wow.
well, it's so like weird. Like, I watched a whole bunch of movies, but I haven't like watched some of like my dad still is like, well, why have you not seen Apocalypse Now? And so like I feel like I've been disowned.
I mean, that's that's classic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apocalypse Now. What was the other one? There's like 3 in the Vietnam cohort. I always run. What was the one with? That was the one Marlon Brando, right? Apocalypse Now.
Right.
Then
It's
there
like
was,
Full Metal Jacket, which you
Full
consider
Metal
That's
that
what I
one?
was thinking of.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's
Mhm.
that
So,
one, and then
Kubrick, right?
there's one more. Yeah, that was Kubrick.
Yeah. I can't think of the other one. I didn't
I'm
watch.
blanking on it, but yeah, there's it's a Oliver Stone film. Born on the 4th of July, I think maybe. I'm trying to remember
no,
the name.
that's not a Vietnam film, is it?
I might be getting it confused. It's possible.
But I think it's interesting what you said earlier. Of you wish you had studied some of these things or computers or something
Right.
else in school, but you ended up in the gender studies department, and I think you were just looking for answers. Like, it makes sense
Right.
why you
It's just normal
went,
for young people,
which is
to
normal,
seek that.
especially
Mhm.
you're trying to figure out who you are and your identity and all this stuff. It's like, and this is what
Mhm.
makes I think the gender ideology stuff so like
Pernicious.
horrifying to me, is that
Yeah.
young people don't know who they are. It's a whole process to figure that out, and many of us, I would say most of us, probably don't even start to solidify into who we are and figuring out what truly motivates us, what we want, like
Late 20s.
yeah,
early
like
30s.
25, right? The gray matter in your brain stops developing, and that's when you're kind of fully finished developing mentally.
Girls a little earlier, like 23, but
So-
most boys 25.
Like, when you see like this stuff like Jazz Jennings on TV, or what happened to Chloe
Yeah.
Cole, it's crazy
Horrifying.
that they could allow a 15-year-old to undergo a process like that. And it's like, I didn't know shit when I was 15. I thought I knew a lot because we're all like, we're a little full of ourselves at that age, and we think we know exactly what we want, and who
There's
we
there's a natural arrogance
Yeah.
that comes with
Sure.
youth.
With youth, yeah. It's just like, but man, I'm trying to think about, like, I'm thinking about me at 15. And I'm like, I was a little dumbass. Like, imagine, like, I just said, oh, hey, I'm a girl, and that's exactly what that's what I am, and you're gonna just believe me, and you have to affirm me, and if you don't, I'm gonna harm myself or whatever. It's like, if I were, I didn't think that when I was younger, but like if I were growing up now as a 15-year-old, I probably would have been so sure of myself that, yeah, I would have been pushing everyone around me to affirm me in that direction. And then look what happens. Just a few years later, someone like Chloe realizes, like, oh, well, there was all this other stuff going on.
This all changed.
Yeah.
This culture just like changed so fast. Like,
It was a gradual thing, but I think some kind of tipping point happened.
well, I mean, it's only been, we're only 23 years into the 21st century. In the 90s, the idea of sex changes for kids would have been totally unfathomable
Oh yeah.
and unthinkable. There would have been, riots in the streets. But today it's like, people are, when people speak out against it, you get labeled transphobic. We had an interesting experience on Twitter recently. Some alt-right bot detector labeled our podcast as, what did they call us? That was
I was not prepared for you to bring up that tweet.
they called us a far-right podcast.
Well, one of
that spreads COOF-related misinformation.
One of our followers
transphobia.
One of our followers commented on something and basically
Wow.
said, trans men aren't men or are women. And this other rando, he, him, tags a bot.
And the bot goes through your followers list, finds the most offensive
and it
person that you
says-
follow.
Oh.
and
It
lays that
says,
out there.
our follower
So
is
apparently our
following-
podcast is a very...
is following Dan Delafay, host of Dangerous Rhetoric, a far-right podcast that promotes COVID-19 misinformation
Oh,
and
no.
transphobia. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
we made it, guys. We're in databases now. It's just so random.
Sorry, Camille. I guess
Oh, my
I
gosh.
didn't warn you that you were appearing on a far-right podcast.
Oh no, just
Canceled. Yeah, it's crazy because we're moderates, fairly moderate.
Very moderate. I used
Right.
to be very liberal, until not too long ago. So
Same.
really, the COOF and the gender mania really sort of just like smacked me over to the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, it's like now I'm a little more
Right.
conservative than when I was younger, but that's actually kind of normal from what I understand. A lot of people, when they age, as they age, it's kind of normal to become a little more conservative, and it is normal when you're younger to be a little more liberal. We all want to save the world and be part of the next cause, and I think like the elites and the people in power, they understand that. They use those good intentions to whip up the youth into some movement or whatever to get votes. And I think that's a big part of this too, is like the whole gender ideology thing. They know it's going to get them votes from among the youth, so they support it. And that's why you have people like Joe Biden up there, like talking to Dylan Mulvaney, right? Which is crazy. Like, this person is like a woman now, wasn't even trans for like a year, and it's like you get invited to the White House because you have millions of followers on TikTok, and then that just further reinforces this stuff. When you have the president of the United States sitting down and
I
reinforcing
still haven't
it.
watched that interview.
We don't need to watch
oh
it.
yeah.
I kind of want to do like a real mocking reaction video of
Yeah.
like Mr. Josh Slocum.
But calling us even transphobes too, it's like I said earlier, we had Sarah Higdon on the show. I would sit down and break bread with Sarah any day. Sarah's a great person.
Yeah, I have no problem with trans people. I'm not afraid of them.
It's the radicals. Sarah doesn't.
It's the appropriation of the culture to manipulate children that I find reprehensible.
Another thing too is like Sarah doesn't expect anyone to play this mental game of viewing her as exactly as the sex that Sarah's trying to appear as.
Yeah, Sarah knows Sarah is a man.
Yes, it's like,
and he wouldn't get mad at you for using he, him pronouns.
He'd probably just say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to hang out with you anymore." And you have the right to not associate with people. But the fact that Sarah's pushing back against this stuff and trying to protect kids, that's a good thing. We should want anyone on our side who's willing to do that.
Yeah.
And two, isn't trying to get people to play this mental game where we must see Sarah as the biological sex that Sarah's trying to appear as. Sarah even says, I have a mental disorder, and said that on Twitter, and
got temporarily
booted off
booted
Twitter.
for it.
Like, people had to like tweet at Elon and be like, "Oh, what's up with this? Like, Sarah's trans. Why are you booting Sarah off?" But because because Sarah said I have a mental disorder and admits that. You know, it's like you're not even
Mhm.
allowed to do that anymore as someone who is
The truth
trans.
is now hate speech.
But the point is, like, hey,
Right.
I did these things to myself and underwent this process medically and all that to deal with a mental disorder. It's the people who are trying
Yeah.
to say, well, I am exactly the sex I'm trying to appear as, and you must see me as that. Those are the radical types. Trans women are women. It's like,
Yeah.
no, they're not. Like,
I think that's the other thing too, is that like when you're confident, like you don't care what other people think. That's very telling, like when you are like not like when you're seeing like these people like, you must affirm my gender, you must use my pronouns, like you must do this, you must like that. For me is telling me, okay, you're having these kids and adults who are like insecure with themselves, because like if you didn't need other people to affirm you and to like that tells me that this person's insecure, like this person has things that they need to work through. And I know, like when I started addressing my physical health, I was like, that was the weird thing, was that like I've been trying to work on my confidence for years with like the slew of different therapists, and it wasn't until like I started doing the physical health stuff that I was like, wow, like I'm actually getting more confident, like just through addressing my physical health, which is like another weird thing that nobody would ever tell you. But yeah, that's my concern, is just like listening to like this sort of like this language of like, it's telling me, I'm like, hey, like these are people that are insecure and need to work on that. Because like if you're like I met I've talked to Buck Angel, and then it's just sort of like I can tell that he's like secure in himself, because like he doesn't have to have anybody affirm it for him. So
we're going to try to get Buck on as well soon.
Nice.
Tranpa.
Yeah.
Right.
And good for people like Buck too, who are speaking out about this stuff, because they know it affects them as well. Like they just want to live their lives. They don't want to be tied up into all this radical stuff. They don't want to be connected to
you get it from the crazy trans activists, and then you get it from your own audience, and other conservative people who are like, you're contributing to the problem, and at the same time you're trying to like speak out against it. It's a mess.
Yeah, like I said, I think we need all the allies we can get when it comes to protecting the kids. That's like the number one priority right now, and that's why people like Buck are speaking out, because they don't want to be tied in with something that is harming children in that way. And it's like, hey, that has nothing to do with me. I'm not promoting that. Like I'm a rare case, and I went through something as an adult that I chose to go through. I had like he was also Buck was also one of the first, I think, trans people in general who underwent surgery and was public about it and all of that stuff. So it's interesting to see one of the so-called pioneers is actually on our side opposing the spread of this ideology and it being taught in schools and all of that stuff.
The have you heard of Billboard Chris? Camille, are you familiar with him?
Yes. Yeah, I've heard of him.
I was just out with him in Boston for a couple of days. We had a little event up there outside the Children's Hospital again.
Yeah, he came and crashed too. He spent the night here.
Yeah, it was good to hang out with him. Big fan of his work.
Yeah,
he's a nice guy.
Just funny because he was down in DC before he came up here, and he was out there with James Lindsay and Alex Stein, Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Chloe Cole,
Tiffany Justice, Chloe Cole. And they were just there wasn't like a planned event. They just sort of like happened to all be in DC, and they gathered outside the Capitol and hung out with Chris. And Chris had a bunch of extra signs of his, and they just were hanging out, talking to people, doing the normal thing that he does. And they did this write-up in LGBTQ Nation, basically claiming that Marjorie Taylor Greene had like this. Oh wait, this isn't the right article, but that she had an anti-trans rally and that nobody came. Here it is.
Yeah, it wasn't even a rally. First of all, like Billboard Chris doesn't do rallies. He
just goes out and talks to people.
He walks around or he stands in a particular spot where he knows there will be people. has his signs on and is encouraging people to converse with him.
The rally
That's
was a veritable who's who of contemporary transphobic trolls,
Mhm.
including the book banning parents' right groups, Moms for
Oh
Liberty,
dear.
detransitioned young adult right-wing media darling Chloe Cole.
That's quite a sentence, right?
Yeah, right. J.K. Rowling fanboy Chris Delson. That's Chris. And conspiracy theorist James Lindsay, and sexually harassing comedian Alex
I
Stein.
love how everyone's got a title.
Yeah, everybody
It's
has
so
an
good.
adjective.
But Chloe's is a real mouthful. Detransitioned young adult right-wing media darling. Like, wow, that's
That is.
that's quite a thing
Uh-huh.
to call a young woman, an 18-year-old who's
Mhm.
But this is
been
how
put through this
they
process and
talk
chose to
about.
speak their story.
Right.
This is how they talk about people just trying to speak honestly about
Yeah.
these issues. Have you had a lot
Right.
of harassment? Have you had a lot of negative attention, or has it been mostly positive?
Interestingly enough, it's been mostly positive. You know, a lot of people have been supportive. I think that there's a couple people, and some of them are the trans rights activists. Some of them are like, you're an adult, you should have known better, and you're stupid, and you should be institutionalized, all that fun stuff.
No compassion.
Yeah,
So-
no compassion, like for like everything I've gone through. But yeah, that's kind of like the two things of like two responses I've gotten. Like I think it's kind of interesting because like it's really brought people together. So like I've noticed like I get people who are Christian who are like thanking me, and they're like, God bless you and such, and I go assume Christian, but anyway, they're Christian, many of them. And then I've gotten a lot of people on the left. I've got radical feminists following me, so it's just like I was just kind of surprised because I'm like especially like having those experiences in women's studies circles, like where I developed CPTSD. It's like I was like, well, am I I can't go back there at all. So I was just kind of like surprised when now I'm center right. Like I'm like, okay, wait, you're following me? Like I'm like, you're okay with that? Because it was like that sort of call out culture experience. But yeah, no, it's amazing like how, and it's great that we have like so many people together from like different sides.
Can you talk a little bit about, I don't want to make it difficult for you, but can you talk a little bit about how you like got the CPDSD from these women's, like what was happening that was traumatizing in these women's studies groups?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because this happened in 2010. So this is like kind of when the woke ideology hadn't really gotten out yet.
Right.
But I remember like it was just like that call out culture was happening within women's studies classes. So like it was like I like one example was there's somebody who's okay. Let me like wind back a little bit. So what had happened? Yeah, what had happened was that we had done like a fishbowl exercise, and somebody would be oppressed and somebody would be oppressor. And so the thing is that the people who are playing the oppressor were being treated like they're actual oppressors instead of like, this is an exercise of like how we deal with these conflicts from this like critical theory lens. And so what had happened was that we were discussing this as a class, and I gave an example of, I was like, like take for instance Draco Malfoy, like the actor who played him, like he was being treated like he was Draco Malfoy, even though he's not Draco Malfoy. Like he's just an actor, right?
Tom Felton.
Tom Felton. Yeah. So I was like bringing that example up. Somebody else brought an example up, and then we had this this guy who was like a peer mentor in the group, which is like a teacher's assistant. He shouted at both of us that we're both wrong, and like I was just like, and I just collected my things. I just walked out of the class, and it's kind of like weird. Like the teacher actually came out and tried to call me back in, and I was like, I'm done, and I just like I left. And then like we ended up talking about it. He ended up apologizing, but it was just like you would go into these classes, and it just like it felt like this heavy air would just like loom of like about this class. It was just like it's so unhealthy. And yeah, I like another story was that like I remember, so like I was like I remember this like was the first time I'd gotten a group of people to laugh since I was probably in grade school. And so because I was like, you know, kind of shy. And so I was telling this like skit that I'd seen on YouTube from College Humor. It's Gilbert Gottfried reading 50 Shades of Grey. And it's beautiful. So he's just going like, inner goddess. And he's like, you know, reading this audiobook of 50 Shades of Grey. And these women are listening to the audiobook and they're like, oh, no, like, you know, they're just like absolutely disgusted by it. And he's just like, it's just like this assortment of women being like, ugh, you know, and such. And he goes like, clitoris. And, you know, it's just like absolutely horrid voice.
His
and then,
voice
like,
is amazing. He passed away recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gilbert, we love you.
Yeah. Yeah. Gilbert Gottfried's great. And so like,
Funny.
and then like at the end, like this woman's, she's just like, oh, that's hot. Like, it's just like, she's like so excited by it. And so like, then I'm telling this and the whole group laughs except for this one person. And they say, you know, he's an asshole, right? And it just like the whole group fell silent. And it's just like, I was just like, I don't know what to do. It's just like, it's almost like, what do you say to that? Yeah. And so it's just like experiences like that. It's just like they pile up over time. And I was just like, I get so scared. And you're in this ideology that's like, you're not supposed to hurt people. And you're hurting people by like, or hurting people by, you know, doing like even doing a joke that it's where the joke's not offensive. It's the person who told the joke that's offensive. So it's like, well, I mean, at that point, I didn't know anything about Gilbert Gottfried other than that he voiced Iago in Aladdin. Yeah. So, yeah, so it's like,
great role.
Yeah,
love that.
Yeah, great. He did a great job. But yeah, it's just like it's like crazy that you're supposed to keep track of every single person and like what they've done, and that it's just like it's impossible.
Yeah.
And so
that is it's a Sisyphean task. It's this, you're constantly just it's a Kafka trap. You're just, no matter what you do, it's never good enough, and there will always be something that somebody, you know, that there will be that one person in the corner who won't laugh. They'll be like,
Yeah.
You know, he's an asshole. Right?
They also do guilt by association.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't even matter, say, if you've done anything or said anything wrong or offensive. If you just say follow the wrong person on social media, or if someone knows that you're a friend with or an acquaintance with someone who has problematic
ideas. That's the new
ideas,
thing. Like there was that woman, I think, what was that company? There was a gaming company that somebody noticed this woman was following like the Daily Wire. And it, you know, it led to her getting fired. Well, just because she was following.
It's just like the bot incident we talked about earlier.
Just saying, you know,
the whole point of calling that bot up on Twitter is that
to create this oppressive atmosphere that you experienced personally that led to your CP. They want to recreate that at the macro social level, so that everyone is constantly afraid that anybody could be called out for anything at any time, simply if they appear, you know, on the wrong side of the political aisle, or they're saying an unpopular, you know, bit of information about, you know, perhaps a pandemic or, you know, an election that's just not allowed to be spoken.
Yeah. And I think this is an important point, because I think one of the biggest ways that we can resist this stuff is to have these difficult conversations with your friends, and to like actually say what you think about stuff, instead of hiding that and self-censoring because you're afraid if those people are going to associate with you anymore or not. And you should ask yourself very seriously that if there is a particular view that you hold that you're afraid to express around people you consider your friends because they might not be anymore, are those really your friends? And do you really want to be around people like that, who you can express yourself to and have a civil dialogue with about things, and disagree civilly about stuff, where they'll just not associate with you anymore? Try it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I don't know what your experience is, Camille, but Danny and I have lost many friends over the last like 3 years or so because we were very vocal about certain issues.
It's okay. We've met a lot of other cool people just from doing this show. You know, people like you. We've connected with so many interesting, fascinating people, and that void has been filled. So there's a silver lining to it. It hurts at first, but then you realize like, oh, well, this is actually better. You know, just let these people go, let them fade, you know, and go their own way, and just be true to yourself. Stop lying, because that's what this comes down to. Is I think there are more people than we realize who do agree with us and do have questions about these things and want to say something, but they're too afraid to, so they lie, or they at least don't say the
Right.
truth. Even if they're not lying, they just avoid the topic
It's a
entirely.
fascinating experience. I went to college in DC. I went to American University from around 2002 and I graduated in 2005. And I had some another, just basic year of undergrad at a smaller local college. But we had nothing like that. Nothing like this call out culture.
Right.
Nothing like that. I even took a class on North American taboos, which could be, arguably early forms of wokeism, where we talked about different things that. Oh shoot, hold on.
Yeah, New York City.
Pause for New York.
That's okay. It's normal. People can still hear us. I'm
So
sure.
loud.
It's part of the the
I might just cut this part
atmosphere.
out too.
Right.
I might just edit this part out too.
Yeah, this happened last time we
Before.
had Gothics and Carrie Smith on the show.
Yeah.
Gothics was like,
She was making
"What
a
is
point,
that?"
yeah, and then the loud siren just goes by, and she's like, "Are they okay? Is something happening?" Like, it's just New York.
Yeah, we
Sorry.
live right next to
Right.
the hospital.
Yeah,
What was I saying?
I don't know.
Oh well, it's gone now.
You were talking about graduating in 2005, then you were
Oh,
yeah.
the taboo.
Yeah, we had taboos, and then I also had a class called Oliver Stone's America, which was really interesting, and it was sort of like a critical recent American history through the lens of Oliver Stone's filmography. So that could be seen as it was definitely a lefty sort of class. We had this lefty
Right.
professor, and we had Oliver Stone come in and talk to us about give
Oh,
us
he
all the
came in?
narratives.
Oh,
Well,
that's
he
cool.
didn't come in; he video conferenced in.
Oh, close enough.
And we had, we got to ask him questions and talk about the films and stuff, but it was very subversive. It was very sort of paradigm overturning, because we are critically examining recent history through the lens of Oliver Stone's film, trying to overturn the mainstream historical narratives that, about Vietnam or about the JFK shooting and these things that were very controversial. And I loved it. I was super into it at the time. So I probably would have fallen right into the wokeness had I been a little younger, come up,
Right.
in the mid 2010s, 20-teens, as opposed to graduating in 2005. So it's scary. It's just capturing the educational institutions, and it's sort of hurting the children. And now the children are very angry. We see this a lot at these protests.
Well, now it's also
Yeah.
in the highest ranks of government. Like I said before, you have the president of the United States,
Rachel
affirming this
Levine.
stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Sam Brinton.
we have these
Right.
non-binary.
Did you hear about
and
Sam Brinton and the
trans
luggage?
people.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Didn't he steal the luggage or something, or
Yes,
the
not
clothing
once,
or
but twice.
Twice.
Oh,
He
no.
high-grade luggage. So now he's facing 2 different charges, and he's
oh
out of his job.
Yeah.
So that's all gone.
Yeah, imagine
Right.
risking your high-level paying government job because you want to steal ladies' clothes and their luggage.
That's
It's-
severe
yeah.
fetish.
We think it's
Yeah.
probably a fetish thing
it's heavy kink,
where he gets off on
stealing women's
stealing
clothing.
women's clothes and putting them. I don't know.
And then after he got caught for the first time, he did it again.
yeah, which is crazy. It's really crazy.
Oh, yeah, and the crazy thing about that too is I think that part of it's it's that lie that you believe, well, I'm this, or I'm non-binary, or that, and it's just well, but there's nothing to be non-binary too. There's not a transition, and I think that that's kind of the sad thing, is that instead of being honest, okay, I have this thing that I need to struggle with, it's I have this, I'm this wonderful third gender, and I'm or not a gender. I mean, that's a crazy thing too, is that there's arguments about this being a third gender, and then there's arguments about being outside of the spectrum, or on the spectrum. It's well, wait, this is crazy. Instead of well, we have two things, we have male and female, and then we can have a variety of presentation or whatever on
Personality
that,
differences.
and
Yeah.
personality differences
Wear what you want.
on that sort of thing. Yeah. Right.
There's no right way to be a boy, and there's no right way to be a girl. You just,
Mhm.
but you don't have to, coerce one into thinking they're the other because they're a little, gender non-conforming. It's perfectly natural for girls to be a little bit more butch sometimes, and perfectly natural for some young gay, typically boys, to be a little bit more feminine. And to take those people and be oh, you're acting like the opposite, so now we're going to medicalize you,
So you must be
sterilize
the opposite,
you, surgically alter you. Like,
And
no.
what's so
Why?
crazy?
Stop.
What's so crazy about the
Mhm.
whole thing too is like these ideologues claim that they're
Mhm.
opposing gender stereotypes when really it's like you're imposing them. You're the ones
That reversal, that narcissistic
like-
reversal,
Right.
and that gaslighting.
you're using these rigid gender stereotypes to determine if someone is trans or not trans, and whether or not we should.
I
push
saw
that in
Billboard
that
Chris
direction.
doing this thing. He was a really interesting strategy. It's like, what is a trans kid? Because like it stumps them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
They can't give a short, succinct, because there's no way to identify somebody. Because in my perspective, trans is a process that you
Yeah.
go through.
not an
It's
identity.
not, like you can't
Mm-hmm.
be trans like you can be gay. Like you're trans if you go through the process. But a lot of these people, they go into these long diatribes. It was so funny. I saw this based black mother of 6 arguing with this 18-year-old white girl about these issues, and mom of 6 was not having it. Mom of 6 was clearly like, children
Yeah.
are children. They change their minds from like day to day, especially from year to year. There's no way they can consent to something that's going to be a permanent, lifelong thing. And to
Yeah.
watch this girl just like flounder and stutter and be like, well, and this, that, and I have trans friends. It was just it was such a treat. I felt so privileged to be a
Well,
witness.
I wanted to clarify something
Yeah.
with Camille. So you identified as non-binary, right?
Yes.
It wasn't that you were saying, "Oh, well, I'm a boy now." You were someone who believed that you were kind of in this in between.
Yes, it was a
space.
non-binary
Exactly.
Neither. So, like, when did you start to actually identify that way and to conclude that, like, all right, I'm non-binary? Was this 2020 as well?
So and this is kind of like where it gets a little complicated because I had trauma around my gender and around, I guess more like, how would I put it? Like more of like, I had trauma around being a woman and being in my sexuality and stuff around 6th grade. So that's like when it started. So I was doing similar things of like dressing more masculine. Like I didn't want to wear girls' clothes. And then I went through like a brief phase in like high school where I was wearing women's clothes and feminine clothes. And then I went to more androgynous. So like masculine, feminine, androgynous was kind of like was what I did in like college, was the androgynous stuff. But I didn't want anything to show my curves. I was like, and part of that was trauma. So, but yeah, it was like when I was, and I think that that's part of the issue is that, when we're looking at these colleges, they're treating non-binary, or like these classes, like the women's studies classes I was a part of, they're treating non-binary like an actual legitimate thing. And it's just like, it's crazy because like I said, it's just like you can be outside of the gender spectrum being non-binary. You can be in the gender spectrum being non-binary. You can be a third gender. It's like, wait, you can't even decide on that for being like non-binary. So it was, I mean, for me, it's just like I've had issues back from this traumatic event, but it was like in college where it started. And then it was like I saw a gender-affirming therapist in like 2016. And that's when I started believing I was non-binary. And then, from there, I got the surgery in 2020.
So they reinforced that idea, would you say?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Interesting. They didn't push back at all. They didn't say, well, maybe, there's something else going on here, or they didn't even ask any questions about this.
No, there's no pushback.
And did you come to that conclusion yourself, or is that something that they suggested? And then you were like, oh, yeah, maybe you're right. I guess I am non-binary.
I like the therapist I saw in 2016, which really solidified it. Like there was no pushback there. There wasn't any pushback like from my doctor because I was like, I'm looking into top surgery. Like I brought this up with my doctor. And there's no pushback from him. There's no pushback from the gender therapist or the surgeon. So that's why I'm like, this is definitely ideologically compromised as our medical system. So
Entrenched, it seems.
They like we said earlier, they either think they're actually doing good or they're too afraid to push back because they don't want to be quote unquote canceled. And that's, I think, what's getting a lot of them to just step into line and to just not question it at all because they don't want to be the one to do it,
Well, yeah, they previously we saw in the Toronto gender clinic, there was Dr. Kenneth Zucker, he was famously stripped of his credentials and kicked out of his position there because he advocated for the watchful waiting approach. He, saw for many years that children that presented with gender dysphoria, they would resolve on their own, generally speaking. And most of them turned out to just be gay kids, like gay adults.
Yeah.
And he was ousted, fired from his position, went through, multiple years of lawsuit with his former employer, eventually won and got a rather nice settlement out of it. But that was just the one example of the drama, and why you could understand now with him being so famously prosecuted, why other doctors would just sort of, if they're, professional organizations are telling them that this is the new standard, now we're just affirming across the board, a lot of them will just do it. And, it takes a rare type of person to stand up and, feel that it's wrong and speak the courage of their convictions and not just go along with whatever the trend is du jour. And it's rare.
We should get Kenneth Zucker on the show.
Maybe we could, I reached out once. Guest. He's hard to find. He's busy.
Yeah, he's older too. It looks like
he's an older guy.
70s.
Yeah, but he's had these experiences, and it's like what they're doing to Jordan Peterson right now. They're trying to take away his credential, and this is what they do. They go after credentials, and they sort of close ranks with the professional organizations, and they generate the standards, and that's how these things.
They attack Peterson for anything and everything now. Like we brought up the carnivore diet earlier. That Michaela swears by. Well, her father swears by it too. When a lot of his issues also went away when he started to become more strict with that and to just eat, a more restricted diet and just stick to meat.
It makes you wonder how many of these, gender dysphoria or these other chronic problems, especially, with the young kids now with the obesity, they're gonna I lost my mind when I read this. Young kids, the old approach used to be called watchful waiting. If a kid was a little pudgy, if he was a little obese, they would say, okay, he'll probably grow out of it. Most kids go through that growth spurt. Now they're saying that no, they're not growing out of it. In fact, it's getting entrenched. They're going on to diabetes. They're having more complications in adulthood. So now they're saying maybe we need to put these prepubescent obese children on medications and offer them surgeries for their obesity. And I was like, wow, this is like just like the gender dysphoria trans issue. It's just like medicalize, like, and start cutting into the kids and giving them pills because it's all about that money. And it's crazy.
It's insane. It's like, that's the thing too. Just like what I found, which surprised me, was like when I started eating meat again. If I just like eat like a steak, you just don't want to eat more. Like, there's something satiating about eating meat versus like a lot of these other foods. Like if I eat like rice, like I just like, I don't have that filter. It's so interesting. Like I can't, like, I'll just eat too much rice and I'm like, oh, why am I like over, why am I too full? It's like, it's just like, I don't, right. And so like, it just like that filter goes away when you eat certain foods. And so it's like, and then we've demonized like red meat in particular, saying like, that it causes all these health problems. And now there's all this stuff coming out saying like, no, it actually doesn't cause all these health problems. We've been wrong about it.
They did that for butter as well for the longest time.
Exactly.
Butter and
then the replacement product from butter was all these, these artificial butter made from oils,
seed oils,
hydrogenated
which
vegetable
cause inflammation, cause more problems.
Exactly. I cut out seed oils too, because I was like, I follow a couple like this, like, I think it's like seed oil disrespecter and stuff like that on Twitter. And I was just like, I was like looking at this, I'm like, oh, this doesn't sound like something I should be doing. So now I'm like, I cut out seed oils and now I just do animal products and I feel much better. So it's like, wow, like this is like such a bigger issue. And yet the one thing that like, I think people should be looking at first, like, there's a lot of things I did that doesn't need to be looked into, or like, it needs to be looked into, but I think the easiest thing for people to have access to is going to be their diet and like changing their diet. Yep. And so it's like, well, why not do this non-invasive, safe thing first before going into these experimental invasive surgeries? it's crazy.
It is nuts.
It's just such common basic sense. Like, try something simple like diet and exercise and talk therapy first before you start cutting into your parts. Like, oh God.
Yeah, and we're the crazy ones for suggesting that.
Yeah, we're hateful for daring to suggest that. We're crazy. We're alt right, this, that, the other.
I think honestly, the diet thing is the biggest revelation in talking to you. And like I said earlier, I don't know anyone else so far who's gone through what you're going through and has made that connection in any way. And I'm curious now how many of them who are still struggling with this would benefit more if they actually addressed it at that level, you know, just simply trying to change what you're consuming and putting in your body, and then seeing how much, you know, that alleviates your anxiety or dysphoria and these other, you know, symptoms that they're going through, aside from the other things too, like obviously therapy, talking through your traumas and those sorts of things are important, but like changing what you eat is just, that should be like such a base level thing. And doctors hardly ever talk about it. Like the last time I had a doctor's appointment, it's been a while, it's been a couple of years. They didn't ask a single question about what I ate. Nothing.
Right. Yeah, it's just like,
what happened to medicine.
Right. Yeah, it's just like it's just like, because I know, like, what was it, like somebody was talking about like they had to like eat liver because they had like an issue, and it was like they're like, it was disgusting. That's like what a doctor would have, it must have been in like the 50s, like, because I was talking to one of my grandparents about this. And so it's just like, it's like so weird that we've gone so like to this like pharmaceutical way of like dealing with health issues, instead of like, well, let's think like basics, like let's go back to the basics, which would be diet. And it's, I mean, that's just the thing. It's like everything that helped me was like non-invasive, and you know, it would probably be a little bit experimental on the most part. I mean, hyperbaric oxygen therapy has been around for like 200 years. It hasn't been really tested as much on like the mental health issues, like what my case study was. But it's like, this is nuts. And so like really what I want to do is that, and I'm not sure if it's going to be because I'm working with D-Trans United, or if it would be like through GenSpect or through my own thing, but I really want to do like a holistic health approach to like help like people who are considering transition, and then also detransitioners, you know, because we need that. Like there's nothing, like particularly for detransitioners, like there's no doctors that, like there's no protocol to treat us. Like there's nothing out there. And so we need something. And then it was just like through all these things that helped me, I'm like, okay, well, let's just look into it. Like even like maybe like this thing that helped me isn't the answer, but let's like look into it and let's be experimental, which is really what I think science should be doing.
Yes.
You know,
at least try it. You know, it can't hurt to try it, to just maybe eliminate something out of your diet and see how you feel for a while. And then if you really want to see if that's what's causing it, try reintroducing it for a while and seeing if those symptoms return. That's an experimental approach to this, and you'll see very realistic results from that. But it's just like you said, these are non-invasive approaches. And it's I think it's the best way we can try to go about this to help alleviate some of the suffering, because clearly people are suffering. Like I don't think anyone would feel that they have to go through a process of like changing their sex or attempting to, because I think we got to get rid of that language too. You can't change your sex. It's not possible. We need to stop selling that lie to these people. But to undergo the process of chemically and cosmetically altering themselves in order to feel better, when there might be these other alternatives that aren't invasive at all and might help them feel well enough where at least most of those dysphoria symptoms can dissipate.
Right. And I think that kind of like it kind of reminded me when I was talking, like, I don't know why this came up, but it, like when I'm thinking of people who are activists, we're going to have a lot of people who are also vegan and vegetarian. And so we're dealing with people who are probably a population that are going to most likely be trans, because that's kind of like a whole thing, right? The whole package of like, you probably care about environmentalism, you know, you care about racism, sexism, transphobia. Like this is going to be part of that whole package. Yeah. We're going to be dealing with a population that's more likely to lean towards veganism, vegetarianism. I know I was a pescatarian. I'm not as common as the other two, but, you know, and then they're not getting these like, I mean, I know like when you're vegan, exactly. Like when you're vegan, you have to take B12 supplements. And like there's probably other things you have to take too, but
Yep.
and I don't even know if that's more bioavailable, because that's the thing too, is that foods are going to be more bioavailable.
Yep.
And from everything I understand, meat's more bioavailable than these plant foods are.
Yep.
So yeah, it's just just insane. Like I just wish somebody had said like, hey, like just try eating meat again. Like, you know, it's not the protein, like, because somebody was like, well, I'm worried you're not getting enough protein. And that's not the thing. Like, somebody needed to say like, look, meat's more bioavailable. Just try it and see if it helps your mental health for a month. You know, do carnivore for a month, see if it helps. Or like a carnivore leaning diet, like, you know, cut out the seed oils, just try it. I would be in a different place now if I had known back then what I do now. And so it's like, really, I just want to prevent this from happening to others. So
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
lucky that I had a background in biochemistry
Mhm.
and molecular biology. So from a very young age, I got sort of clued into the necessity of things like cholesterol, which forms, you know, a necessary component of all our cell membranes. It helps keep them flexible. And it also is a precursor for things like testosterone, human growth hormone, and a bunch of other, you know, fatty chemicals that our body needs, you know. So when they demonize cholesterol, when they restrict, you know, and tell people not to eat as much meat, you know, eat these vegetables instead, which, as you said, you know, they don't have the same nutrients that are in the same way that they're able to be digested. It causes all sorts of problems. And I think a lot of the ADHD, a lot of the mental illness, a lot of the mental problems in the youth that we're seeing more frequently are from things like malnutrition, from these, you know, crazy little diets and, you know, other stuff, you know, contamination and things. But I think it's great that you're going to be putting together some way to sort of holistically approach. I was going to ask you what you wanted to do in the future, so I'm glad you sort of got to
Answered
there.
that already.
But no, I think that there's a huge demand for it. There are definitely people that are still hurting. You've seen firsthand how these doctors will ignore their patients and write off their concerns as just like, oh, you're just making it up. Like Shape, they were telling Shape, you know, that he was responsible for you know, his complications because he didn't dilate properly when he had followed all the instructions.
Shape got the bottom surgery, so that's a really you know, extreme step to take, and it does tend to have a lot of complications, and how many of them are informed of how likely that is to happen, because it's like
and then when they happen,
it's a wound. You're creating a wound in your body.
They mistreat these people, you know. They write them off. They mock them. They claim that they're the problem when it was actually, you know, a natural consequence of the procedure they got, and then they just sort of like wipe their hands of it and go on to the next person. It's criminal, frankly.
I think there needs to be more lawsuits like what you're about to do, and there needs to be some accountability. Sorry, but like these doctors, these psychiatrists, all these people, like there needs to be some accountability.
Well, there's that one TikTok surgeon, she the Yeats, the Teats. She's just on there, you know, advertising directly to kids. Like,
lock her up over it.
That was I just heard of like a TikTok from the Yeats the Teats lady, or like not from her, but like somebody who had seen her. And like this person, he was like, he's trans and he got the like the top surgery, and he's like, I was dealing with all these things, like and she kept dismissing it, like, oh, you're okay, and then it was ended up being like this really bad infection, and it just it was like this like golf ball thing like fell out, like size of like blood clot or something fell out of like the surgical area. And it was just like, and then like he ended up going to a surgeon, and the surgeon was said like, it's good that you came to me because you could have died from this. Like this was like a bad infection. And it was like, I'm just like, that is so irresponsible. But it's just like, there's just so many of these surgeons I know, like, definitely not as like not anywhere near that, but you know, when I developed all these health complications from the surgery, like I was dismissed from my surgeon. Like I was like, hey, like I had all these issues, like is there any way that the surgery caused this? And she's like, no, but it's just like when I did scar work and stuff like that, and like another, or like PDTR, which is another form of body work, which is again kind of like those more manual therapies. But like when they did these treatments on it, it just like it felt better. Like, and I noticed like my symptoms got better. So like there was, I mean, the thing too is just like all this stuff happened after the surgery anyway. So there's no way that it wasn't linked to the surgery.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like just everything, like the tinnitus happened after the surgery. I developed Raynaud syndrome, which is like when your capillaries shrink like on your extremities, and you know, there's discoloration. I got heat rashes. Like it was just like all these like odd symptoms, but it's just like once they thought I had psychosomatic fever, like all my doctors started dismissing me. Like there was like that stark shift in their tone. And so it's like, okay, I'm on my own and figuring out how to deal with this and how to get myself better. So that's really when I started doing like the holistic stuff. But it's sad because like, it's like, it's so futile to keep going through that medical system, because that medical system isn't going to help you. Like, it's not going to get you better. It's just going to put like a Band-Aid on it, really.
Yeah, I find the medical system is really good with like acute injury. So if you are in a car accident, and break a leg, or if you get shot or stabbed, like the medical system is great for fixing those problems. But if you've got like chronic depression and anxiety, like not so good. Like really, you need a more like holistic dietary, approach. You need something else. But
I wanted to make one final point though on the deeds woman.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
And there's gotta be like some kind of sick like fetish thing going on there, or just like an enjoyment that this woman has in cutting into people and stuff. Because frankly, like if that were a job that I did, I wouldn't be making TikTok videos, making jokes about it and all that stuff, especially if the people that I'm doing this to are people who are clearly struggling, right? Or minors and going through like a difficult time. So just making it this light, fun thing, there's just something really bizarre and creepy about that. And like, there's definitely something not right with that woman. I wanted to just say that because me, I'm like, it's weird.
Yeah, I think a lot of surgeons are a little off, to be honest.
They have
like
to be, but they, obviously there are amazing surgeons out there who save people, right? And they perform these really complicated procedures that do save people's lives. But this is not that. This is not the same thing as that. It's really not.
Maybe I should say like plastic surgeons more so. Yeah, I think that would probably be a better thing. But like definitely not all of them. But like I think some of them are just a little off. I know like my plastic surgeon told my mom like that she like cut off a pound of like fat off of me or something, like, which was kind of like, that's a little weird. So it's just like, again, it's kind of like that sort of detached thing from like, this is kind of like you're carving some healthy person up instead of like, and removing healthy tissue. Like that's, I don't know, there's just something weird with some of these plastic surgeons for sure.
It does remind me of Dr. Frankenstein and that whole story. And I think there's a lesson in that too, like I think you said it the other day, but like just because you can do something.
It's the theme of Jurassic Park.
Doesn't mean you should. It is the theme of Jurassic Park. And like trying to play God, thinking that you can just like change the creation into some other when you can't. Like it's not possible. Maybe someday we'll be able to go in there and like alter the chromosomes at a DNA level or something like that.
We were talking about there's this book Steel Beach, which has a in the book there is it's in the future, and there's a process where the main character goes through a sex change, but their sex change is perfect. So they go into and nanotechnology swaps out their chromosomes, and they go in a man and they come out like a biological woman. Like that's not where we're at, and that's not what we should be selling to young adults and kids that are having like a little bit of confusion or perhaps trauma surrounding
all this is tied into transhumanism as well, this whole ideology of transhumanism. And I think that they really do believe that they can alter reality.
They do. I was reading about this new bottom surgery where they want to give both genitals to people.
No.
So that you get a vajayjay and you get a man.
Have you seen the phalloplasties?
Oh, don't look at pictures of phalloplasties.
Oh, I've seen them, unfortunately.
It's so sad. It's so sad.
this is another thing too, like we talk about on Twitter frequently, because it's like, yes, like obviously this issue is affecting women more and more realistic ways. And there's also a higher amount of girls who are falling into the gender ideology. And I think that's why a lot of the radical feminists are on board with this. You know, it's affecting women's sports, men and women's spaces, obviously puts them in more danger. But this is affecting boys and men too. And this is our fight as well. This is not a fight that the feminists can just try to keep us out of and say, well, no, Billboard Chris, he can't be the face of this movement.
Some particular feminists who I won't name,
we're not going to name
have very, very strong, hateful things to say about Billboard Chris.
Yes, and it's because he's a man. Because he's a man and he's having an impact here. When it's like, dude, he's also a father of girls. So he does take it serious.
They even debate that.
And the gender ideology stuff is attempting to erase the concept of biological sex entirely, which also erases men. And so one of the things I want to talk about was like, and I guess we can end on this point, but like the way like this, just the same way that like lesbians are now being pressured by these trans men to have sex with them, called all these horrible things. You're a bigot, you're this and that. If they don't want to, you know, because they're lesbians, gay men are also now, we are being pressured by these trans men to find them attractive, or to at least keep our mouths shut about them actually being biological women. We're not allowed to call them women anymore. We have to say trans men are men, and even worse, we have to accept their self-identifying as gay men. They're literally trying to put us on as a costume and say that I am now a gay man because I'm a heterosexual woman who has altered themselves to look more masculine, and I take hormones and all this stuff. And yeah, they'll go as far as to say that if we don't find that attractive and don't want to sleep with them, we're horrible people, we're cis gay men, cis gay men, you know, we're bigots. Like,
I don't like that word cis.
And it's like, one, you have a vagina. Two, it may even be worse than that. You have a vagina that you've then put this tube of flesh over that is attached to you, and you call that a penis, and it's like, it's not a penis. We're not attracted to that. We don't want anything to do with it. We don't want to touch it. Please leave us alone. It's literally homophobia from the left. It's left-wing homophobia.
Yeah, it's just like the whole thing. And again, I think that when I hear that, like if somebody being like, you must be like me, you must be attracted to me, you must use my pronouns. Again, it's like that confidence thing. Like that screams like you don't have confidence, and that's something you need to work on. You know, and it's just like, it's the whole thing is like, well, you don't want to date like a trans woman, or you don't want to date a man. Like if you're like a straight person and you're like, well, I want to have kids, like I can't have kids with, you know, somebody who's a trans man, you know, like that's just not biologically possible. So it's like, that's the other thing. It's like, that's like such a bizarre thing of like, well, you don't want to date us. And it's like, well, if you want to have a family, then it's just like, I mean, yeah, you can do other things, I guess. But if you're like, I want that particular, I don't know, if you don't want to go through kind of like this whole other thing of like, I don't know, like the whole
adoption
kind of sci-fi, surrogacy or like adoption or, you know, it's just like, that's what would be required. So it's just like, it's such a, that, and just like who you're attracted to is who you're attracted to. And it's complicated anyways. Like, you know, it's like dating's like already a mess. It's like, now it's just like, you're telling me who I have to like, it's weird. Crazy.
Yeah,
it's hard enough as it is.
It is definitely hard enough as it is. And the confidence thing too is interesting because like, you know, one of the things I could say about you is like, from what you described, from where your journey started to where you are now, you seem very confident. You come off as someone who is quite a confident person. To be able to come on a podcast like this and to talk about the things you've been through, that takes a lot of confidence, you know. And I imagine just 2 years ago, you were the polar opposite of that. You probably were not able to talk about it at all without it being, you know, something really discomforting.
Yeah, it was like, I mean, it's so surreal because in the last 2 years, like I've grown so much as a person, and it's just like, I'd have these like emotional shifts. Like it'd be like, oh, okay, like this is clicking. And then like, I mean, 2 years ago, I didn't even want to have kids. Like, and I didn't want to have a family. I wasn't interested in dating. Like, I mean, it's just like, that's what I needed this whole time was, you know, a holistic health approach. And then before that, I mean, I was so dysfunctional. Like I was just struggling with, generalized anxiety disorder that was like not manageable. Like, I mean, I would be on my computer all day watching videos just to kind of like mitigate the anxiety. And then it was just, I was like struggling with major depressive disorder, which I no longer have. Like I do struggle with mild depression, but I think that's normal for like what I'm going through, and then it's just like my ADHD was really bad. So I just like, I'd be like angry at my parents all the time. Like it's just like, I was not in a good place back then. And so I'm just so grateful that I've been able to do this and do these treatments and, be able to be in a place where, I did, like my parents provided me a space to be able to do these treatments so that I can get better. Like I couldn't have done it without them. So
Yeah, and now you're in a place where you can help other people.
right.
And that's another good way too to get out of our depressive episodes is to try to do something nice for someone else. It's a good way to do that, because what depression really is like it's the attention turned inward, and it is selfish when you think about it. It's me, poor me. And I understand that because I go through it myself, but trying to take yourself out of that and put your attention onto someone else to do something nice for someone else, it's a big way you can get out of that, aside from diet and all these other things. But we commend you, and we're happy to see that you're in a better place right now and that you found a way that worked for you. And I hope your way works for other people. I really do, because a lot of people are getting hurt right now. And
I'm sensing a book in your future.
Yes.
There's going to be a memoir. There's going to be a book. I feel like it's definitely got a lot of important things.
For sure. I guess we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah, let people know where they could find you, Camille.
Yes. So people can find me on my Twitter, Camille Kiefel. I'm also to get better
right now.
Oh, thank you. And then also, let's see here. So Twitter, I have YouTube, which is the Get Better Researcher. I'm also on I have a bunch of alt platforms. So you can find me, I have Rumble and such, and you can find me through all my links. I don't know if it's Camille Kiefel. You can find me on all my links is on my
I got it
my
right
Twitter
here.
as well.
We're gonna throw that in the description.
Yeah, I'll put those links in the description for everybody.
Yeah.
So they can make it easy to find. And we will have you back again. And totally, you're welcome to come back again.
Great.
Follow up on. I'd love to hear, where your lawsuit is in 6 months to a year. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, and the project that you're trying to organize with the holistic approach and stuff. We'll definitely recommend some people in your direction who are struggling.
Totally.
Yeah,
All
thank you.
Camille,
thanks again,
so
everybody.
much.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, give us money.
All
we
the
love
things,
you.
yeah.
And we'll be back again soon with another one. Bye-bye.